Hello and welcome to Choice and Chance Tabletop Role-Playing Games. My name is Chuck. This is a video about initiative. What I think is one of the most difficult systems mechanically and conceptually in tabletop role-playing games. I think it's one of the systems that's very likely to really suck a lot of momentum out of your sessions, really eat up a lot of time, or really drastically impact the outcome of a situation depending on, how initiative goes. And I want to talk about my personal solution for the problems I've had with initiative, why I think it's so hard to change it from a game design perspective and from like a cultural perspective, and then of course probably talk about some memes. There's a lot of memes. I saw a meme on a Reddit that was making fun of people who are getting rid of initiative in their games. It was something like, oh, like you got rid of initiative. Did you see that in a YouTube video or whatever? And I thought about that. I thought it was funny because I just started making YouTube videos and I don't really use traditional initiative in my games. And I was like, oh, dang, I would tell people to get rid of initiative. I guess maybe that means that I finally made it. I've become somebody who would make YouTube videos on D&D. But I think that there are, enormous problems with conventional initiative systems that people ignore strictly because there is no easy alternative. Now, just because there's not an easy alternative doesn't mean it's not a problem worth overcoming, in my opinion. And so, starting with individual initiative. Now, this is the initiative system that's stock for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, where each actor in a combat scenario is going to roll an initiative number with a modifier, and there's going to be a set order that continues from round to round. This system is awful. This is probably one of the worst game systems in any game ever made by anyone. Individual initiative is slow, boring. It drags combat out forever. There are products, like entire products, designed to help you track individual initiatives. So there's like you buy a D&D source book, you buy the game, you have all the stuff, and then there's third-party products, different things. They have like totems and little cards and little figures that you use to track initiative because it's a subsystem that is so bad and so terrible, so damaging to the flow of the game, the balance of the game, and the tone of the game that there are entire kits of tools to help DMs and players figure out how to navigate it. It is in my opinion one of the greatest adversaries to having a good time playing Dungeons and Dragons is initiative, individual initiative. And I was like, wow, that's a lie. You really hate that. I mean, but it works, right? It's like, yes, it works, but man, as somebody who plays with 8 players, oftentimes to challenge 8 players, I need to have an enormous amount of creatures in a combat, or very strong creatures with a lot of actions in a combat. And it's like, this isn't, it's just not a thing. It's just not a thing I can do. I would have hour-long combats minimum. Like, it's just, I used to play this way. I played this way for years. I played with an individual initiative for years, and I had so many different mechanisms for remembering things, for organizing things, and it was just like a whole nother game I was all of a sudden playing when combat started. And I cannot recommend looking into an alternative enough. I know I'm a YouTube person who said don't use initiative. Please look into something else. Now, a lot of people, when they first get off of individual initiative, will go to group initiative. And group initiative is arguably just as bad. It is much faster. But I find that group initiative ruins all the suspense in situations. It oftentimes makes combat encounters extremely strange and lopsided feeling. It's very hard for the suspension of disbelief. It's also just like it has just a lot of problems with like actually its actual effect on the combat scenario. So like, it can ruin your encounters when your players enter into encounter, win initiative, all of them go, and without the creature being able to react outside of, like maybe it has one reaction per round, or maybe it has a couple things that it can do per round that aren't on its turn, but it's just getting wailed on. A lot of the times, if you're playing group initiative, you're not, you're playing more verisimilitude style encounters. You're kind of just, running random encounters. If your players win initiative, they will simply win the combat before the enemy even acts. And vice versa, you end up with extremely unfair feeling situations where the monster wins initiative and outright downs a player, or like the monsters win initiative and just like take a huge chunk out of the player's resources. And it's like, there has to be a better way than this. And I know that some people are going to have opinions on like why I'm wrong about those two forms of initiative, and like I would love to hear how you guys make those initiative styles work in your games without sacrificing momentum, without ruining the nature of the encounter, and without like completely skewing the result. I would love to hear it. But my solution, which I implemented with my group over time, was eventually to go to a simultaneous initiative, which I know sounds impossible. Like it sounds like it can't work. Which is what people told me when I said I wanted to do it. They were like, well, how are you going to organize things? It's a turn-based game. I'm like, well, initiative as it is not working for me, so I have to try some things. And so how simultaneous initiative works essentially is things, just like the title says, things are happening at the same time, which means actions are resolving in sequence with other actions. So it sounds sort of like it would be chaotic and it would be, impossible to manage. Got to tell you, it's actually fairly simple. Players have a certain amount of action economy per round. Each individual player has a certain number of things they can do in a round. Now, this varies per system, but when you're playing a more old school styled game, my players usually just have one action. And sometimes, like, I try and let people do a little bit more in one round, I guess. Like, there's bonus actions. And then reaction-based abilities or things exist. But, like, just for the sake of not getting too out in the weeds, let's just say you're playing a pretty typical modern D&D action, bonus action, reaction per turn, and maybe movement in there as well. So it's really simple. A round starts, and every single player just says what they want to do and rolls it. Those things are now in progress. They're not resolved. Then I go through and have what every opponent is going to do, and I roll it if it requires a roll, if it's an attack or whatever, what have you. All those things resolve together, and me and the players sort out what happened in the round. And I know that sounds, again, like people who have been playing in a traditional initiative style where you're only worried about one character's action. Like, how is this better? It's like, well, I remove the slowness of individual initiative. The part of individual initiative I didn't even talk about is sometimes you have to recap the fight to your players. This is a real thing where you will get, onto the fourth or fifth person who's going in the round, and they'll wonder what everyone else did because it's just hard to pay attention on that level. And then we're also countering the group initiative problem of super one-sided encounters because one side doesn't get to act. So we resolve the actions together. We go through until, there's no actions left to do in the round for either side. We start a new round. We resolve the actions together. And I'm sure there's a whole slew of questions for how specific things work. It does get more complicated, a little bit more complicated, but as soon as you get the general rhythm of it, it's very quick. And I kid you not, this knocked... Man, it cut my combats in half. Let's just be really non-sensationalist. I think it was more than that. I think my combats were probably more like 70% shorter. But it's just like when I started running the more simultaneous initiative style, the player communication increases a lot because instead of waiting for their turn and then wondering what someone else did, they're all trying to plan things that are going to happen at the same time. And the round feels very much like a group exercise. It's even if you're going to go down, for example, and an enemy, you still get to get your action off for the round. So even if you get your action, the enemy action is resolved at the same time. So if it would be a hit that would down you, you still get to do the thing that would have happened in sequence with that. And these things improve the quality of life for players a lot. There's not a lot of worse feelings in D&D than going down right before your turn in a really long initiative order. That is a feels bad, man. I have somehow already talked for 10 minutes. I don't know how I managed to do that. I guess this is a good summation of how I feel about initiative in general, which is that I rage against individual and group initiative, and I think that simultaneous initiative systems of some variety are strictly superior. They're not only faster, they're also better for not having initiative be the star of the outcome of the combat. And, they're a lot of fun if you can get it rolling. It's combats are super, I guess dynamic is kind of a silly buzzword, but they're very dynamic. They are. Everything is happening in sequence, actions are resolving together, and it creates the combat very much feels like it's alive and moving, and it's like a real thing. Those are my thoughts. If there's obviously roast me if you think this is silly, or if you have a question. I will probably, if enough people care or care at all, I will post a little cheat sheet for how I do simultaneous initiative action orderings and action resolutions and stuff like that. And I may even make I might make an example video or something. But thanks for watching, guys. I hope that you have good luck in your games. You're having a good week, and I'll talk to you soon.